Hello, Republic of Gamers, and welcome to ROG Sidequest, the podcast where we talk about all things in the gaming world. I'm your host, Jake Kalinsky, and today we are talking about virtual reality. Pretty much everything from the roots to this, where we are now, and some of the things we're seeing for the future of VR. Joining me on the show, I've got Jeff Campman and Chris Barr. Jeff, what's new? What's good?
Oh man, it's just another week in paradise here. And by paradise, I mean 6 inches of snow.
6 inches?
And
okay.
frozen roads.
I can one-up you. I just got 14
Yes.
in the last 28 to 30 hours, so that was fun to shovel. I need to invest in that snow blower. But yeah, snow. Chris, you get any snow?
A little bit of snow, maybe like 3-4 inches, but nothing compared to what you guys got. So
Bottom tier
it's
levels.
not bad.
Yeah.
I don't know why
They
I'm
don't bother
excited
me.
that I got more snow, because it's kind of the opposite for most people's POVs, but it's fine. It's fine. Now I'm extra quarantined.
Yeah.
So just
Yep.
on the,
People love to talk about snow, man.
yeah. One of my friends in Texas
The
was
blizzard
like,
of 78.
the blizzard of 96 was way better than 78.
Well, I wasn't there for the 78 one. I'm not
I was.
that old, but I heard. Oh yeah, I'm sure you were. That's what everyone around here was just like. Oh, anytime we get any snow, it's like, well, no. If you were around in 78, you'd know snow.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Anyways, yeah. So speaking about video games, unless we're going to talk about snow-based video games, we'll transition straight into VR. We actually, when I first started here at ROG, one of the first things we ever sat down and just talked about was HalfLife Alyx. And actually, all three of us, when we talked about our favorite game of 2020, we all said that HalfLife Alyx was number one on the list unanimously, which is an impressive thing. Especially when you look at the gaming universe, you look at Valve's importance in PC gaming, and you look at how many people call it the dark times when Valve stopped making games, right? They stopped making Half-Life games. A lot of people will never forgive them for never giving us Half-Life 3, and so on. I mean, there was this long period of time where it was just like, we're going to maintain Dota 2 and CSGO, and we're, maybe Underlords came out, like a few things here and there that they might have done. But for the most part, Valve was not releasing games. They were not releasing single player story driven games, which many of us really loved them for growing up.
Yeah.
And
They were releasing hats though, so I mean, that's something.
Virtual hat driven economies.
It's true.
Hat coin.
oh my goodness.
Diamond hands for the hats.
If Valve releases a hat cryptocurrency that can be used on Steam,
That will break the internet. That will 100% break the internet.
it'll break my wallet. But anyways, Alyx, let's just kind of talk about Alyx as our entry point to the show. What makes Alyx stand out compared to, well, let's rewind actually. Let's go with your first VR experience. Chris, how about you? What was your first VR game? You ever
First
played?
VR experience, it was at CES, I want to say 2016, and it was a little demo with the Oculus Rift, with the Oculus team called Toy Box.
Yeah.
And I was a little disappointed when I got the Toy Box, because there were two demos. There was a shooter and something called Toy Box, and I was just lucky to get an appointment, and I got Toy Box, and I was like, I just get to play with toys, whatever. But it's my time, and I go into this little room, and someone helps me out with a headset on, and they're like, okay, you're gonna be in this room by yourself, but there's going to be someone join you in the game. And I was like, well, okay. So I load up, and it's just this table with a bunch of like children's toys, like blocks, a little toy engine, and a tank, and just some different stuff you can, balls to throw around. And I was like, oh, okay. And then someone else, it was just a head and floating hands kind of scenario, but they joined me, and I could hear them, and we started talking, and I could wave at them. I was like, oh, this is weird. And then like she picks up a ball, and she's like, here, catch, and throws it to me, and I catch it. And then we just start through the course of the demo just playing with these different games. Like we built it was 3 blocks making a bridge. It was like 2 base ones and a connecting piece, and we each picked up one of the individual blocks to lift it up and move it around together. And it just, like, my mind was just, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this, like, this really interactive experience with someone. and I've never met them. And when I took off the headset, nobody was there. Like the experience was over, and I was like, I don't even know this person could be on the other side of the world. And I just shared an experience with them, like 5 to 10 minutes, but we bonded, shared an experience. I was like, I don't even know where they are. They came out, they were actually just in the next room, but it was such a cool, it was the first taste of what VR could be as far as communicating over long distances and feeling like you're actually with another person when you're isolated, which really translates to what we've got these days. But it blew my mind, and I was absolutely hooked after that.
So Jeff, that's like
Jeff?
That's a really nice like origin story for like trying early VR tech demo. What's like the first home game that you experienced that you're like, this is a thing that I want to invest time in?
You know, honestly, the thing that got me, the thing we played the most, because back in the past life I was a media reviewer as well, and we got the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive as part of our just foray into this field. And I think the thing I spent the most time with, honestly, was just Valve's The Lab. That was what it's like. You know, there's an arrow shooting game in there that that was the thing. When I showed it off to people, I would give them that, and they were just engrossed. They would spend, it's like again.
Because it's just tinkering, playing around. Yeah.
It's such a simple little demo too, the bow and arrow one, but it's so fun. It's addicting.
Yeah.
I feel like such a fraud because I've actually never fired it up. I said that'd be a waste of time.
Oh no.
It's worth it. It's worth it. Even at this point in the game, it's worth it to go back because of the individual experiences.
And so I mean, that was what was the other one? I forget. So much of this is lost in the sands of time, unfortunately. I grabbed Lucky's Tale for the Oculus Rift, and that was fine, but that one honestly was not super comfortable to play. It was the way the world moved was not super comfortable, and but I think Superhot VR also.
It
may not have come out.
So much fun.
It's like, oh well, I played this game when it was just a first person shooter, but now I'm in it.
See,
and it's like,
I didn't know Superhot was a game, and everybody when I first got my VR headset was like, you need to play Superhot. So I was like, okay. It was one of the first games I purchased and streamed on Twitch, and I can't even imagine how that game would work as a normal shooter because of how perfect it is and how authentic the experience feels in VR. Because if you guys have never played it, basically when you're standing still, the world is pretty much still. And as soon as you start moving, the enemies and the level, it's like a set kind of course kind of deal. Like each map is kind of like an arcade shooter. They respond to your movement. So you need to quickly, shoot, duck, grab an object, throw it, whatever. And it just, it's really intense. You start to learn to really hide behind barrels and stuff in that game. But it's also the first game that got me to charge head first into the wall and then fall down on the ground and be like, ow.
Yeah.
There's the drawbacks.
There are. Same way I played that game. I've only ever played it in VR, and it's such a perfect VR experience because it's not a mouse you're moving around. It's I'm moving my hands to aim while they're doing stuff. So it just feels like it was designed for VR. And I think it makes me wonder how many other games out there would make for such a perfect translation to VR that just haven't, because the studios don't, have the resources
question.
or desire.
Because I don't know what would translate. Most shooters do not translate well.
No.
Right?
There are ways to do shooters, and I think Alex showed us
Alex
that there are good ways to do shooters.
Yeah.
It did, and that's why it's our favorite game of the
Yeah,
because it did. But we'll save Alex for later.
Well, I mean, for me, the game that kind of became my routine was Beat Saber. I just couldn't get enough of it. Really enjoy just like it's linear, because somebody in chat actually just mentioned that I'm hoping to find a VR headset that doesn't make me feel ill. And for me, that was a problem.
Mhm.
I used to get like horrible motion sickness after playing for more than a few hours, but with Beat Saber, with the simple colors and the very linear like scope of it, I could play for hours and hours and hours and just it'd feel great afterwards. In fact, I broke a
Yeah.
Vive by sweating too much
Yep,
because I was
same.
plugged in for too long, right? And had to
Mhm.
invest in like headbands and
Rip.
everything else because it is a hell of a workout. It really is. But you know, with Alex, you know, that game truly is the first AAA full game we've ever received, and you know, I would feel horrible after playing for 2 or 3 hours, and I'd want to push and I'd want to keep going, but the motion sickness for me in a Vive was I think it's probably due to the refresh rate on the Vive being, what is it, 60 hertz?
I think it's 90.
Is it 90? Okay.
90.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was actually the biggest factor for me. And also my lens is a bit scuffed, so that didn't help because my glasses rubbed against it at some point. So, but that was my fault, obviously, because they can actually do
really,
adjust.
It's really weird how different systems like affect that, because like the Oculus, I can't really get comfortable with it.
The Oculus One,
if
right?
I spend the original
The
Rift.
OG,
If I set that up and spend extended periods of time in it, it'll make me pretty sick pretty quick. But the Vive was actually the more comfortable one, and I could spend quite a bit longer in it without getting ill.
So like 2 to 3 hours, like you're fine.
Yeah,
with Alex, huh? Interesting.
Basically indefinitely. It's I mean, it's such, you know, you think about all the factors that go into making this work, and especially just sort of the coupling between this device and the human audiovisual system, and the fact that it works at all.
Right, it's different for everyone, for sure.
It's a wonder that it works at all, but it does.
Chris, how about you with Alex?
As far as playing it for long periods of time,
any issues?
No, really not. My biggest issue with playing it for long periods of time was simply not you, Jeff, but the in-game Jeff.
Yeah, right.
That whole it definitely took me at least a couple sessions to get through that whole thing, because it was, if you haven't played the game, there is a character that you encounter at some point who he is invincible, he's invulnerable, you can't hurt him, and he will absolutely mess you up. And the premise, you have to navigate this area and do some certain things without alerting him, and he will absolutely hear you. There are certain things where like you'll cough in certain like smoke clouds, so you in the game you have to cover your mouth so that you don't cough and alert him.
Well,
you could also pick up a mask too,
it's really cool because they really like thought it out. There are items in the game where you can put on a respirator, you can have the mask. There are hard hats you can find in the game that you can put on, so you actually have to take the hard hat and put it on so that I can't think of the name of those things, but the guys that come down from above,
barnacles.
The barnacles. The barnacles will just eat your hard hat and they won't eat you. You could and just kind of segueing off that, the barnacles in the gameplay that they created in VR, it's so like in Half-Life your options are shoot the thing or walk by it, right? In VR there's a barnacle. It's like, okay, I'm gonna pick up this box and I'm just gonna throw it at the barnacle. It's gonna latch onto the box, and you're physically reaching over and picking up a box, or you're using your gravity gloves to pull it up to your hands. And suddenly this world is alive. And that's one of many interactions that they brought, to the table with VR. And let me tell you, when I played Alyx for a long session, I would get out, I'd walk over, I'd be pretty tired because I'm getting really into it. I'm squatting, I'm crawling around, I'm just full on just, if my wife walked downstairs, she'd be like, what on earth is he doing? I go upstairs and I I got to pick that up. I would actually flick my wrist like I had the gravity glove and try to pick something up. And I'm like, oh my God, I am an idiot. But I caught myself doing that twice. And it's pretty amazing at the immersion.
I think that one, if there was any one single element that I had to pull out of Alyx that Valve just knocked out of the park, it would be that. It would be interacting with objects. Because I can't tell you how many times in other games I jumped into Fallout 4 last night, VR for the first time, and just interacting with objects. It's this like I'm moving around. It's like, well, I gotta get it just okay. Now it's highlighted. Hit the button. Now I've grabbed it. Whatever. In Half-Life Alyx, once you get the gravity gloves, which is very early on, it's that is completely gone. I never even think about picking up an object. I just do it. I see some ammo and I just flick it. It's in my hand and stuff it in my backpack, and it's just natural motions that I don't have to think about, like making sure I've got this thing highlighted just the right way. Yeah. And it became just as I went through the game, it was like I was looking for things to find and pick up, like not just because I needed ammo or whatever, but because I just loved just like, oh yeah, need that thing over there, yeah, grab one of those.
Really satisfying.
This bottle, whatever. Look at this liquid. Okay, I'll throw it. It made it second nature, and I think that's probably one of the biggest hurdles of VR is making your movements, your interactions with the virtual world natural. Because if I have to think about picking up an object, I've failed. Like the game has failed me in a way by my standards. But if I can just do simple, basic, everyday tasks, like, I could pick up a phone. I didn't have to think about that and concentrate. I just grabbed it. And I think that is what Valve did better than any other experience I've had.
Yeah.
In addition to many other things they did well.
Yeah.
It's not only that, but they remove the burden, because when you're in VR, you are restricted to the amount of space you have, and there are different forms of movement. You can do the simple teleportation, which they did very elegantly, because a lot of people do get motion sickness from that kind of movement, because you're not used to being able to teleport in real life, and yet you're teleporting around in a game. Or you can do the thumb movements, but there's also physically walking around your space. So now you're blending this character movement, because you're moving around a world that's much larger than your physical space. You're moving, with that, but you're also, sometimes you just want to walk over or dive behind a barrel or to cover to get behind. So you're doing that in the physical space as well. By being able to pull things to you, you feel like, oh, I don't have to walk over there. I'm just going to bring that to me. Whereas I feel like you would get really tired and like almost stressed out about constantly looting the amount of ammo and stuff that you need to do. That whole exploration element of the game would feel so much more exhausting. Whereas with the gravity gloves, it's fun. It's interactive. You're actively looking and reaching to grab those things to you.
But it's not it makes sense in the universe.
It does.
It's not unrealistic that it takes you out.
Right. It's just
I'll say I've been playing Cyberpunk lately, and there are so many objects to pick up, and I love loot. I see loot, I want to grab loot. And I feel like it's tedious in a game like that where I'm going around, there's just so many different objects and stuff. And I was thinking about it the other night when I was playing. It's like, man, if this were, VR and like Half-Life Alyx, I'd just be rolling through here, just grab that, that's in, go, and it would be so much fun to pick up these objects instead of looking around and it's like, okay, did I get, well, I might need that grenade later. Okay. And it just makes it a lot more fun in ways that I think will translate so well into other games in the future that we can't do in typical 2D games right now, or 2D viewing space games.
And it's interesting that we bring up sort of this idea of cognitive load. If you were forced to walk around the level and pick up everything manually, like that would suck. But there's also, if you're just watching this game from the outside, you're watching the combat. It's like, oh, well, there are only like 3 or 5, combine soldiers in your area at any one time. And if you come at that as from an FPS perspective, they're like, why is this so hard?
It's easy.
You just point the reticle at them and go. And it's like in when you're actually wearing the headset, it's like 3 to 5 enemies is like, that was the thing that got me the most, not necessarily the motion sickness, but it's just like you feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But it's like, where are these people? I say people. Combine art people.
It feels like people.
Combine art people.
You know, but it's like, where are they? What are they doing? You know, am I in cover? You're literally managing every aspect of your positioning, your aim, your movement in the world. It's like, where can I go next? Or, you know, at some point you get in the wrong spot and you get overwhelmed and you die and you try again. And so it's just the way they managed that also. They made it feel just as challenging, but if you're not actually in the headset, it's very difficult to sort of convey how that works.
Right.
And they made me rethink. I think they rethought how you approach combat too, because you're right, in a shooter, it's like a typical FPS. It's real easy for me to move around, you know, duck behind cover, you know, just use my mouse, highlight a guy,
Boom,
shoot,
boom,
headshot,
boom.
done.
Yeah, you gotta aim.
And in this game, I love, especially I love pistols in games where I can just, you know, sit back and, you know, sneak up, pick them off and stuff. Like sniping with a pistol, that's kind of my jam. And I would do that in Half-Life, you know, Half-Life 2, Half-Life 1. Alyx, on the other hand, I tried that and I'm not as good of an aim in that game as I would like to be. I need to spend more time. I spend more time shooting guns in a video game using a mouse than I can ever imagine spending with a real gun in my hand, even in like paintball, laser tag, and that sort of thing. So I had to rethink how I approached combat, because I very much am, you know, hang back, shoot, pick them off, safe, nice. And that wasn't working. So I started, you know, using my teleport. It's like, oh, I can teleport over there. And by the time he realizes I'm over there, I've already shot him and moved on. And it just made me think about combat in a new way that is far more tactical and exciting than most other shooters that I've played.
I think that's the other impressive thing, though. You mentioned like utilizing the teleport in combat. They make you really blend all those movements well, because as you first start playing, you're going to be more cautious. But as you start to get more, you know, tuned into the game, you start to get a feel for how it all works. You will start swapping to your shotgun mid teleport and popping a dude in the face, and then swapping back to your machine gun and teleporting back to cover and popping up and go. And it's like, you know, there's something about that is just, I'm a badass. Like, oh my goodness, this is me doing this. Like, yes, it feels really cool. Okay, so obviously we love Alyx. I think we'll probably see more in that line of things. I mean, we can all hope that we'll get Half-Life 3 someday. We can all hope. I'm not gonna, you know, spoil anything at the end of Alyx. We can all hope that we'll get more content there. Even though the game's been out for a while, there's enough people without VR that I don't want to drop any spoilers in there, because it is a game that everyone should play. Like, just hands down. So there's just on the Valve news spectrum in games, Valve is notorious for dropping little teasers in their patch notes, and everybody will read every line of text in their patch notes. In the past, they've announced all kinds of new updates and information, you know, months and months in advance, just with little snippets and lines of text. Well, in the most recent update for Dota 2, I believe it was, for the Dota 2 Pro Circuit, they posted a big update, and there was a whole line of text with a bunch of different like variables for game code for a game called Citadel. And the rumors of Citadel is it's essentially a multiplayer VR game. There's like a few lines here and there. One thing is there's no fall damage, right? You know, typically in all these games there's fall damage. So I don't know if this is going to be some kind of arena shooter. I don't know if this is going to be something that's like a multiplayer Portal-esque game. But I have we have no clue. There's a lot of speculation. All we know is it's VR and there's a primary and secondary fire. So it is some kind of shooter.
So long as there's no vertical motion, I'll be okay. Because when you're playing Alyx, you get in elevators. I had to shut my eyes. That made me. That was the one thing I just couldn't tolerate. So I don't know.
You said arena shooter, and I'm thinking of trying to play like, you know, Quake, longest yard, longest mile in VR, just fly into that one platform out there. But I'd do it if they created an experience. Like I want to play a competitive shooter in VR.
Maybe they find a good way to give you maybe you're in space and like movement with your thumb in all directions feels natural. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Like they've already proven that they can break the mold and figure out how to make a game feel really good for a full-on story-driven game, but now they're apparently going to try something in VR. We can't speculate too much on Citadel. We can talk about some of the other things Valve has publicly tested and talked about internally. I guess one thing they did that they thought was a really, really fun gameplay experience was they took Left 4 Dead 2 and they had players playing on the PC. So they were just playing their normal game of Left 4 Dead 2. And then they had a master player who was in VR and watching everything from above and could like reach down and drop, care items, drop, health packs, spawn zombies, spawn mutants, like whatever, and just be like the master operator. So like they're really trying a lot of different stuff with VR, and that makes me excited because I want VR to be like a good multiplayer experience. And right now there are fun little things here and there, but overall not too much.
It's not there yet. It's not quite there yet.
Okay,
I think we're moving that direction, and I think we're still limited by our input technology, which is I think something that Valve has done a really good job of trying to move forward on. Starting back with their work with the Vive, and now the Index, and of course looking to the future, they've got some ideas.
Well, that's a perfect segue because as we're on the Valve target right now, a lot of you have probably already heard, but Gaben was recently interviewed by a news channel in New Zealand, and one thing that he talked about is he really thinks that brain-computer interfaces are the future of gaming, and he truly thinks it's not sci-fi. We're going to have, in our lifetime, brain-computer interfaces where that's really just going to take... I don't know if it's gonna be like a direct neural uplink or what, but they're gonna bring that, thought, your actual brain, more than just your mouse and keyboard as primary control schemes for games, which obviously from there, if that actually is possible, the sky's the limit, right? What do you guys think about that? Jeff, let's start with you.
Well, I think it's cool in the abstract.
You seem speculative.
I'm just extremely hesitant to like gamble on that kind of thing. It's like, okay, it's one thing if you're building a smart home, and by the way, I don't like smart home devices either. But,
Jeff likes his privacy.
I'm kind of a technophobe in that regard, and it's like, if you're gonna stick electrodes in my brain, it's like suddenly you are on the hardware upgrade cycle, but with your head. And it's like, no, dude, it's like, who's gonna go first here? Who's gonna like adapt this first? What are the capabilities gonna be like? How is it gonna develop over time? How are we gonna manage, sort of subsets and supersets of capability? And it's an interesting systems design problem, and I don't want any holes in my skull in the process.
So any kind
what
of
I'm saying is you need that type of interface, like you need a hole in your head.
Exactly.
What if it's like something you clip on your ear?
That would be more comfortable to me.
Okay. I don't know if that's something that's, in the realms of possibilities, but I feel like most people agree. If you have to do something that's a direct uplink into your head where you have to install something, modify your body, nobody's going to adopt that. Right? We're not anywhere near the world wanting to be cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is cool, but do I want that? No, I don't have any piercings or tattoos myself, and I'm not ready to install tech into my brain either. But if it's an earring,
I think it depends on the tech.
Well,
I'm not going to be first in line,
right?
If I can download,
it's commercially available.
Yeah. Well, once Google starts beaming ads directly into my head, I'm going to be pretty upset. But if I could download a second language, that's pretty cool. But that's a whole nother discussion, right? We're talking
Right.
about,
Because yeah, I mean, I think one of the, and this does play back into an interesting obstacle with VR though, which is, ultimately, all the controllers and stuff, all the human computer interaction that you can do is limited. It is an abstraction. Whereas if you have this any theoretical brain computer interface, it's like, okay, well, all you need is your hands. This thing ideally will know where your limbs are at, where it's like, okay, well, you're moving this limb, you do it in game, which to me is more interesting than just like, oh, you think and something happens, because that's just, there's not something super compelling about that. But like if it had some sort of way of determining proprioception or whatever, like that would be revolutionary.
I agree that like it has to be done right. Otherwise, don't waste anyone's time with it. And that's kind of how Valve approaches things anyways. I don't think they would release any kind of Half-Life game with tech they weren't happy with, right? They'll cancel it way before they actually release it, because that's just how they do things.
Yeah.
But right now they're talking about bans as basically part of the head strap, and we'll see where that all develops. There are a few games out there where it's like, focus on the alien's head, and if you focus properly, their head explodes. But that's like about as linear as it is, right? There's nothing else to it than that. That's not breaking any boundaries for making me even want to try it. I'll watch someone do it on YouTube and be like, neat, and then I'm over it, right? It's like, it seems a little too meh.
It's
overall.
a toy at the moment.
Yeah. Well,
it's hardly even an experience. It's just a tech demo.
So speaking of just like VR technology and kind of where we are, well, let's start with the now. Obviously we have, you've played with the original Oculus. I have a Vive. Chris, what do you have?
Vive OG.
You can talk about the like the Index being like the next tier, where you're getting a higher refresh rate, you're getting a slowly higher resolution display, a slightly higher resolution display, and then now we've got we've gone even further with like the HP Reverb becoming like a new highly desirable one, and the Quest 2. But really these are all just kind of like gently pushing up these specs. They're not really changing much. Do you think there's going to be anything that's going to change the game in the next 5 years in terms of tech?
I mean, I think there's a lot of tech that is dependent on this. And, we've got the screens with a high enough refresh rate and with enough pixel density, because, the screen door effect does affect a lot of people and can contribute to motion sickness and stuff. You've also got, the power side of it in the PC, which I think we've really come a long way since, 2016 or so, when I was first playing with my Vive. And now, especially, the 30 series cards, the latest cards from AMD, like we've got a lot more power to push the kind of frame rates that you need for VR. And I think that's really going to help us. But there's some catalyst that we're missing to get us to what I would call the second generation of VR headsets and experiences, because I think that still what we're seeing today is, improvements, but you're right. It's just improvements on specs,
right,
and less improvements on new ways to experience it.
Well,
and a lot of people are trying.
Yeah,
and I think that's out there.
Let's talk about the Valve Index controllers, because I think that's like, you look at Half-Life Alyx, and Half-Life Alyx, when you play with the Vive controllers, which sounds like we all have, that is you click the trigger and your hands open and close, or you fire the trigger, right? And that is the content of that. With the Index, which is a game that is bundled with Half-Life Alyx, this is Valve, creating this for Half-Life Alyx really in mind. You have full finger movement with all your four fingers. I mean, I've seen people, there's a piano in game where you can sit down and you can play piano. I have not been privileged enough to test this out to confirm or deny how well it works, but from the videos I've seen, it seems pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the most important thing for the next tier of VR? Is Valve on the right track?
Yeah, I definitely. One of the things that I wrote about a while back was, again, it's not even a matter of having your controllers in your hands. This technology from a company I can't remember the name of anymore, but it's literally just hand tracking, right?
Yes.
And I I feel like this is a necessary step in between that and just like the headset knowing where your hands are, and then your hands are the controllers, because like that's so you're removing abstractions. Like the controller is an abstraction, and so if the headset just knows where your hands are, what your hands are doing, it can resolve it at a fast enough rate. It's like, okay, well, you just reach out and touch things, and you don't need to. I mean, there are issues for this. Yes, it's like you can grasp an object in your hands. Your brain doesn't really know anything about the diameter of it, and it's like, well, you just gotta have to play with that. But again, until we have a direct neural uplink, we're not going to be able to solve that kind of problem.
That's a great little segue, because one thing that was shown off at CES this year is haptic feedback gloves. There's a few different companies making them. One of them is called Sense Glove, the Nova VR haptic gloves. And this is early technology. I don't know what the performance is on the battery, but the intent here is if you were to grab a spherical object, the gloves would then shape into that shape as you reached and grabbed, right? So to simulate the shape of the gun, a sword, a ball, whatever, it's going to do all of that for you, which is a whole different level, I guess, in terms of, making that experience feel correct. Would you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a kind of a combination of like haptic feedback type gloves as well as inside out tracking. But I also think like you can use the hands and your arms as an interface itself. I was playing again Half-Life or Fallout 4 VR, and one thing I love is you just bring up your wrist like you're looking at your watch and your Pip-Boy's there. Unfortunately, you're still tied to the controller to actually interact with it, but I'm imagining being able to, do that and just touch your hand, your other hand, and use it as some way of controlling it, or you're flipping through, navigating it like all of our sci-fi, shows that we're watching. I've been watching The Expanse lately.
Oh man!
And I love when they just flick away a screen and it's gone, and I'm like, I can't wait.
Or they just flick up on their phone and it goes to the TV.
Yeah.
Like it just like okay, that's.
Yeah,
it feels
and
really
we can do that in VR. I think like that's the kind of stuff that we can't do it with physical tech, but we're getting there with VR, and you can absolutely create those types of interfaces. And I think rather than having a controller that you hold, your hands are the controller, and you can even add different controls where you're touching your hand to create some type of feedback that the glove can sense and stuff like that.
Or even just like flipping your wrist over brings up a screen or something, right? And then on that screen, you touch the interface with your hand. Maybe that's the menu. There's a lot of cool ways to do it where you build it onto the character. That's the character's watch or whatever. Or
I think Alyx started doing
they
of
did.
that too.
They did. Like the health and stuff, is all it's well integrated. And that's the beauty of doing this correctly. But it's interesting just to think about before we get to the the brain interface. It's going to feel more real to use some kind of haptic feedback. But transitioning away from like the hand discussion, the feet discussion, and moving around your space, that's a lot of people say, oh, I don't have VR because I don't have room for it. Or they set up VR in their living room, and every time they want to play, they've got to move the coffee table, they've got to push the couch, into the kitchen or something. And that's a big barrier of entry. So figuring out something for your feet is like a problem. Now, has anyone had the opportunity to try one of those omnidirectional treads?
Yes.
You have?
Yes. It was I want to say GDC, probably in the 2016 timeframe. And I don't remember. I think it was Omni was the company that made the one I used. And they had created their own game specifically to use with it, and it was very stripped down basic shooter. And they had two of these I almost call it pods, and you just get in line, and whoever was in front of you or behind you, you just play against them, and you get strapped in. And I had to take off my shoes and put on these special like really slick slipper type things.
Mhm.
Because the base it's a dome shape, so you can be running and it just resets your foot to the right spot. And it was kind of fun. Like they even had a gun controller, I think.
Did it
so I was
feel
really getting
natural?
that experience. No. I'd love to say it did, but one of the major problems is it straps you in at the waist and kind of locks you there. Well, you can't really crouch a whole lot. Like, you can only do so much when you're tied to that. And if I wanted to run forward, it wasn't just I start running forward. It was lean, and then start trying to run in that direction using the kind of ring that was around me as something to kind of lean into as I started guiding my feet. And it never felt natural, but I'll tell you, I've never been more exhausted after 5 minutes of gaming. It was a full body workout, even beyond any of the other, like Space Pirate Trainer or just Beat Saber, any games where I'm like trying to move around and do stuff like that wore me out. And it was fun, but I think that is absolutely the wrong direction for that.
What if they made Hamster Simulator?
You give me a full wheel and yeah, I'll run on that thing. Sure.
It's one of those giant cat wheels.
They do.
No, I think the problem there is something that I think we can solve. I loved Mythbusters back in the day, and they had one experiment they did where they went out into a field and blindfolded themselves, and then would walk in a straight line, and every single time they walked in a circle. And I think that, and in VR, I don't know where I'm at in my room most of the time. Like I have a rug that I can kind of use to feel where I'm at, so I don't go too far off course. But I think there are ways to use the motion that you're using in game to navigate, but the game can subtly shift you so that you are basically walking in this circle setup that you have.
Right.
I think that's probably one of the more creative approaches for it, and I believe some people are working on something like that, but I think that might be one route to go.
Well, we've got a question in chat just kind of based on, we've talked about gloves technology and movement technology. What do you think is holding back VR the most?
Ooh.
I do think accessibility, or attainability, I guess, and we've seen the development of the Oculus Quest. I think that's a huge wrecking ball through that wall.
Just for accessibility, for cost and
cost reasons. And I think that is basically going to be the ongoing problem. Because not everybody should have a gaming PC, but not everybody does have a gaming PC.
We can actually just throw that question to chat. Let us know why you haven't jumped into VR yet if you have not pulled that trigger.
But it's just really interesting to talk about all these sort of higher. We may just see something like we do with PCs where you have a 1920 by 1080 display, 2560 by 1440 4K, more powerful graphics cards, more powerful processors. Where basic VR like the Quest is going to start out with a controller like this. You're going to have a standalone headset, and that's the foundation. That's sort of the fundamental VR experience. And then we're going to move on to hand tracking. We're going to move on to haptic feedback gloves. We're going to move on to I don't know what else. But there's always going to be that fundamental experience, and it's going to build up from there. But definitely a way for people to get in on the ground floor and just try this technology, see what's so transformative about it. Even without, again, I still think PC VR is the best. But when you can get into the system for, I don't know how much a Quest is, $300 or up, I think. That's just the biggest obstacle as I see it. Because if there's no platform, if there's no network effect happening, that's all my friends are in this, I need to get in. I think the saying about network effects is the growth is quadratic or something. Each node in the network is super valuable when all your friends are in it. So
yeah,
don't know, I'm butchering that terribly, but it's you got to have people in it.
It sounds like Chad agrees with you. Most people say cost versus the current value that you get with it. Games and apps are lacking. There isn't a lot to do, which is, those are things that are just going to take time, like any new platform. But we are getting there. The Quest, obviously, it's nice because it is standalone. It does have the wireless option, and you can also do PC VR, because you're not going to play Half-Life Alyx without a PC, right? You are going to need the power of a proper PC for that. But
yeah, that's the beautiful thing about it, is that it's scalable.
Yes,
like it grows. If you want to get more into it, you can just plug it into your PC. Or if you just want to play, I don't know, like natively on the headset, you're in a hotel room somewhere and you just want to escape, you can take that with you, and ROG laptop week. But
yeah, we were talking about the Flow X13. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's and that's the other thing that's always troubled me about it. It's just like, you try all these cool technologies. Like one of the trippiest demos I ever had with VR was with Tobii, who makes eye tracking hardware.
Yeah.
And they handed me a Vive with eye tracking in it. And with it off, it's like they had you throwing balls at things like just a carnival game. And with it off, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm totally uncoordinated. I cannot aim for my life. And they turned it on. It's like, oh my gosh, I have superhuman hand-eye coordination. It's like, okay, how can I bring this to the Vive I already own? And they're like, well, you can't. I was like, well, okay, that's unfortunate.
That's promising for the future, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's awesome. But then it's like, I've already invested $1,000 in a setup. I want to get 5 years out of this at least. It's like the beautiful thing about the Quest is it scales up beautifully.
Yeah.
With the better hardware you can plug into it, the better experience you get. And that's just, I think that's necessary for any type of VR to take off. It's just, it has to scale. It has to be a platform people can build on. And Valve really got that with the Vive. HTC and Valve really got that with the Vive, because it inspired this whole sort of hacker ethos. People could add stuff to it. You could get a Vive tracker and throw it on anything, and suddenly it was in VR. And I mean, it's like having that open platform, having that flexibility and scalability is just going to be key. But like I said, there has to be a ground floor. And I think that's where the Quest is. So.
I'll take a different position. Definitely accessibility, it needs to be there for widespread adoption, but I think quite possibly what's holding us back is the way we're approaching, or the game designers and developers are approaching VR. Because if you look at the history of video games, the video games have been around for a long time, and they didn't change much for a long time. And in fact, if you go back and look at, games from the 80s and versus what we're doing now, the early shooters and stuff are still very reminiscent of what they are today. It's a mouse, it's a keyboard, you point, you shoot, you click. That's what it is. That's how we've learned to interact with any type of game that is not physical in nature. It's a digital virtual game. You use a mouse, a keyboard, a controller, and you look at it, and it's that type of play. And I think that's kind of holding us back, because we have always approached interactive media from a flat 2D design. Sure, there's been experiments with 3D and stuff, but this is the first time where we're not looking at technology. In a sense, we are inside the technology. We put it on ourselves, and you can look around and you feel like you're inside the tech. And I don't think we still quite know what to do with that. And part of it is just the history and the, we've already been doing this for so long, we don't know how to think about it differently. But also tech and widespread adoption of specific technologies, specific interfaces. You were kind of touching on this, Jeff, but like if one company, Tobii's making eye tracking stuff, Leap Motion's doing some hand tracking stuff, but these are all little pieces that only interact with specific software and things like that. So I think that's an issue, but it comes down to how we approach video games and technology from the inside out. I think that's what's going to be the next breakthrough, is people looking at games and experiences differently.
Well said. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's just it's been around for a long enough time where VR has, like, everybody knows about it, everybody knows a little bit, but a lot of people haven't tried it, and it's just fun to kind of look at the ecosystem and see where it's going. Seeing more companies getting involved, and like HP making their own headset. They worked directly with Valve and Microsoft on that headset. That's kind of a nice step to be like, okay, they're collaborating with people that are already, like, invested in wanting to do things. For a while, the HP Reverb G2 was the only headset that could play Microsoft Flight Sim in VR. So that's like a cool, like, little piece there, because they're wanting to push that. We're seeing more experimentation from Valve and Microsoft with augmented reality, where they're using the cameras on the VR headset to try and, like, make that experience a little bit more, tying in the real world, making it a little bit more authentic in different ways. And I haven't really tried anything out on that realm myself, but I think that's pretty cool. But this is a good question from chat as well. Do you have a favorite genre in VR? And how does that differ from your favorite genre in non-VR? Jeff? If it doesn't change, that's fine.
So I'm just gonna plug the last episode or the episode before last of Sidequest that we did and talked about rhythm games, because, like, I'm sort of a omnivore on the desktop, but, like, rhythm games are my favorite thing to do in VR. And that medium adds something to those types of games that you just can't get elsewhere.
That's true.
So yeah,
absolutely.
If you're a DDR fan, or you're, like, at all into any sort of rhythm game, like, that could be a compelling port of entry. It's really unlike anything else.
We talk about it a lot. If you want to check out our YouTube, we have that VOD up there, or the past broadcast here in Twitch.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris?
I play a lot of shooters on the desktop, and I think that's probably one of the more fun things to play in VR, because it's, in the desktop you train your mouse movements, your twitch movements, and you commit them to muscle memory. But it's, I don't know, there is something about playing laser tag with my friends as a kid, playing paintball and stuff, where it's just this, you're actually trying to shoot and whatever, and I really enjoy that. Space Pirate Trainer was one of the first games I got with my headset, and it's probably the one that I've played more than any other. And if you haven't played it, it's you're in a pretty stationary spot, you can move around, and you're on a platform, and just these little round robots come up in different patterns, and you just have to shoot them down. They're shooting at you.
It's VR Galaga.
You can duck.
It's
VR Galaga. Yeah. And, like, it's a full body workout, because, like, when you get shot at and they're getting close, like, time slows down a little bit, so you can do some matrix moves. But, like, after 10 minutes, like, I'm rolling around on the ground just trying to find a spot where there's not some gunfire coming down so I can shoot. And it's just really fun. Like, it's a different way to approach those kinds of games. And I think that's exciting. But it's still a lot of what I still play on the desktop too, on a traditional screen.
I'm personally
I won't play Rocket League in VR, even if that ever becomes a thing. I just can't even imagine.
Oh man, yeah.
Speaking of cognitive load.
Wow. I'm lucky. I've got, like, a dual flight stick set up at home, and foot pedals that I use for games. Like, I have a very unique control scheme for Star Wars Squadrons. So I'm a fraud. I have not, my Vive is not set up currently. We're going through some renovations at my house. I'm going to have a new space soon. But I'm really excited to get the Vive set up, set up the base stations once again, and really, because I have played Elite Dangerous in VR, and it's just one of the most immersive things you can do. There are some things that are rough, like just if the flight stick doesn't match the exact model. I talked about this we had a flight sim show last week, actually. I talked about how if your flight stick model does not replicate the exact one in the game, and you're trying to reach for like the side buttons that are on the base of the flight stick, and you don't necessarily know where those are. You then have to lift up the VR headset, try to find the right one to press, and that kind of kills it. It really does. But
really does.
Obviously, that was me not being familiar with the controls of the game or the actual controller I was using, and that's something that with practice, I mean, you could definitely create that immersion with the right hardware. I'm just hoping we see, like, if there are these big popular flight sim games, I want them to work with the big popular flight stick makers to make it so that you can just go in the settings and change it to be a certain model that perfectly replicates that physical item. That's the fix, in my opinion.
I think we're actually going to see, I've been thinking about that since our last episode, and I think that's something we're going to see in the next several years, is an easy way for you to take any object, any 3D object that you have that you want to be represented in your game. Controllers are the, most logical form, but to just be able to, take a few pictures, render a quick, version of it, a 3D model that you can then place in your game and have some kind of maybe tracker on it that you can interact with that object in your physical space, and
don't worry,
it translates.
Nintendo's got you covered with cardboard. You can make a cardboard whatever you want. But yeah, no, I agree that having a physical device, like a physical like sword, whatever, it's cool. It just you gotta be so invested in a game already that you want to play again and again and again to make you want to buy a specific device to use in that environment. But it is a cool idea.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, which is pretty much the maximum that we do for this show. So any final thoughts on VR that we might not have covered already?
I'm just excited about the future. Like, honestly, there aren't a lot of new technologies in gaming that come along. I think that, like, the Switch was exciting because it was a new way to cross between, a typical console and a portable. I think that was neat. But we don't have a lot of new technologies that radically change how you play a video game.
Right.
And I think this is that next thing, and it's going to change a lot. I think in 10 years we're going to look back at this and go, man, VR was in its infancy back then.
Yeah.
Like, just look at what we do now. But it's going to take a little time. But I'm really excited. I think Gaben is onto some really exciting stuff. I'm just excited for the future.
All right. Well,
how about you, Jeff?
No, I was just gonna say, this, like, 10 years on, hopefully, I think Valve did a good enough job with Alyx. It's not going to feel dated, and we can revisit it back then, or revisit it in the future rather, and be like, wow, this is just as good now as Half-Life 2 still feels to play.
That's really what I'm looking forward to. The next level of headsets with better refresh rate, better resolution, even though they're already getting better than what I have, and then the next level controller. And for me, that's kind of when I'll invest more money in the technology and continue having a blast with VR. But guys, thank you for tuning into ROG Sidequest. We do this every Tuesday now. We've got this is our 5th episode. So we've talked about rhythm games, we've talked about flight simulators. We tied a lot of those discussions into today's show because they are relevant for VR. And we will dive into more normal things as well, not just these niche communities, not just these small things, because I want to talk about the new Resident Evil. I know that because that game looks like a lot of fun. But let us know if there's a specific topic you guys would like to see us dive into. And thanks for tuning in. We will be back in a few days with ROG Pulse to show off our new Strix laptops. We've got 2 different lines that are coming out, and I'm actually going to be doing hands-on Friday with a stream, hopefully, assuming it gets here in time. It's been snowing a lot, so who knows. The G17, a laptop that I'm going to be streaming and playing with 300 hertz beauty. I've never even played on anything more than 144 hertz, so I'm really excited.
You're in for a treat.
It's a blast. Yeah.
Can't wait. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. GG's.